Good morning, people, and welcome to all the newcomers around here. Thanks for joining in the conversation. I thought I'd take a moment this morning and, as concisely as possible, try to describe the task that lies before us, at least as I have come to see it. This is a moment in history, and our circumstances are such that most of us have suffered deep injury from the pure fact of our own existence within civilization. Most of us, at least those of us whose humanity is still intact, cannot help but be aware that our very existence is preconditioned on injury to other. And for those of us that still have the capacity to care, we find ourselves fractured. We find ourselves being conflicted and traumatized not only by the fact of being victimized, but by being the victimizer. There seems to be very few solutions. We are forced by necessity to participate in a system that willfully seeks our own destruction. We find ourselves caught in a horrible internal conflict where we feel alienated and purposeless and adrift and unable to connect. But any attempt to open our eyes forces us to look out at a world that very often is quite ugly, quite often is violent, quite often is injurious. What to do? For me, I have found the essential meaning in life in seeking a life of meaning, and most specifically, in seeking meaning in connection with other. This is simply an impossible thing to achieve if one is beset by dissociative tendencies forced upon us by the traumatic fact of our living within a destructive civilizational system. I have personally found it to be essential to step away from that system, to be able to regain the courage as much as I am able to once again face life squarely, face life as a relationship, face life in a first-person posture, with life thought of as a noun, not as a verb. And to be sure, this process for me has required a change in mindset. But equally, if not more importantly, it has required a change in behavior, and in a practical and objective sense. I have had to find techniques and strategies by which I could step away from participating in a system that was hell-bent on destroying everything that I love and find beautiful. And of course, there are people who will say, well, the compromises you make here in your life in the moment to lessen your footprint and your impact on this world ultimately matter very little. People will certainly say that, but what they do not understand is the reason that I try to tread lightly is not to save the world, but save myself, so that I can relate with an open heart, with a clean conscience, with eyes capable of being open, with ears that can hear. And to be clear as well, while I am advocating for this view, it is not a view of my own creation. I am no authority. I am an individual who is trying to rediscover a worldview that has been the dominant worldview for human beings, for most of human beings' history. It is simply that it is a worldview that is at odds with the civilizationalist project, that requires on infinite expansion and infinite resources and infinite growth for its very existence, where it collapses and as such is forced to be predatory. And you too, inasmuch as you live within it, are forced to be predatory. And that injures your heart. Hence the trauma, hence the disassociation, hence our lack of connectedness. But there is a solution. And that solution lies in a process of rediscovery that I have come to call Neo-Indigenous living. And by that I mean a process of rediscovery, something new, a new interpretation of values that were once ubiquitously held by cultures that had symbiotic relationships with life, and as such could function within their habitats for millennia. For us new to this process, our goals will be less lofty, simply to open our hearts and to open our eyes and regain the ability to relate with other in a meaningful manner, being as much as we are able, without internal conflict and in good conscience. Perhaps in such a manner that if we are aware of the preciousness of the gift that we have been given called life, and the immense investment that has been made by previous generations for our opportunity to enjoy that gift, then in final reflection we could stand before our ancestors and do so without shame, showing that we had been good stewards of that value, and that we have been thoughtful co-participants in the creative process, and perhaps even to hope that life itself is better for our having been.